I arrived at my parents' suburban home with a flutter of hope in my chest. Maybe tonight would be different. My sister Sarah was visiting from New York, and Mom had insisted on a family dinner. As I walked through the door, Sarah was already there being showered with praise about her latest promotion. When I tried to share news about my own recent promotion at the design agency, Mom barely glanced my way. Instead, she sneered, looking me up and down in that familiar way that made me feel 2 inches tall. "You'll never be as good as your sister." The room went silent. 20 years of suppressed pain erupted inside me as I stood up and said calmly, "Then ask her to pay your bills." The looks on their faces told me my life was about to change forever. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I hadn't planned to say that. For 32 years, I'd been the good daughter, the one who stayed, the one who helped. But those words had been building inside me for decades. Growing up in the shadow of Sarah had been my entire childhood experience. I remember my 8th birthday party when I'd proudly shown Mom the drawing I'd made. She'd glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Dusty," before turning her full attention to Sarah's science fair certificate. "Look at this Harvard material right here." Sarah was only 11, but Mom already had her future mapped out. Our childhood home in Wisconsin had been filled with Sarah's trophies and certificates. My art contest wins were stuck to the refrigerator for a week, then disappeared. Sarah's achievements were framed and displayed permanently in the living room. The Sarah Wall Dad jokingly called it, though he never suggested adding any of my accomplishments. Dad was always more balanced in his affection, but he was passive. When Mom would go on about Sarah being the smart one and me being the creative one, said with that slight tone that made it sound like a consolation prize, Dad would just rub my shoulder and say, "Your mother doesn't mean anything by it." But she did. We all knew she did. I remember the day Sarah left for college at NYU. Mom cried for a week. When I left for the local state university 2 years later, Mom spent the day cleaning out my room for her new home office. "You'll be just down the road anyway," she'd said, as if proximity somehow made my milestone less significant. After college, I'd gotten a job at a local design agency. I was good at what I did, earned decent money, and most importantly, I loved it. Sarah went into marketing in New York, climbing the corporate ladder with the kind of determined ambition Mom had cultivated in her from childhood. "Dusty, why not aim higher?" Mom would ask during our weekly calls. Sarah just got another promotion. She's got that corner office now. You know you could have done something similar if you'd tried harder. What Mom never mentioned was how I'd been the one who dropped everything 3 years ago when Dad had his heart attack. I was the one who drove Mom to the hospital every day for 2 weeks. I was the one who took unpaid leave to help Dad through recovery. And when their insurance didn't cover all the medical bills, I was the one who started paying their mortgage. 3 years later, I was still paying it along with Dad's ongoing medical expenses. Every month, $1,500 out of my account to theirs. Sarah sent expensive gifts on birthdays and Christmas designer handbags for Mom, golf clubs for Dad, but never offered a dime of financial help. I'd kept quiet about it because it seemed the right thing to do. Mom and Dad never mentioned the arrangement to anyone, almost as if they were embarrassed to admit they needed help from their less successful daughter. And I was doing okay professionally. At least I thought I was until yesterday. For months, my boss had been grooming me for the creative director position. "It's practically yours," he'd said repeatedly. But yesterday he'd called me into his office to let me know they'd hired someone from outside instead. "We need someone with more executive presence," Andy had explained, not quite meeting my eyes. It felt like my childhood all over again, not quite good enough. I hadn't told my family about losing the promotion. What was the point? Mom would just see it as confirmation that I wasn't as capable as Sarah. Dad would give me that sympathetic look that somehow made me feel worse. And Sarah would offer well-intentioned advice that would make me feel like a failure. So I'd arrived at dinner with that rejection fresh in my mind, still raw. I'd almost canceled, but some part of me had hoped that maybe, just maybe, being together as a family would help. Maybe I could even casually mention the situation and for once receive the support I needed. How naive I'd been. As I stood there in the dining room watching Mom's face transform from contempt to shock at my words, I realized that the carefully maintained balance of our family dynamic had just been shattered by my unplanned honesty. Sarah's perfect smile had frozen on her face. Dad's fork was suspended halfway to his mouth. And Mom looked like I'd just slapped her. What nobody in that room knew was that this moment had been years in the making. What they also didn't know was that I had just received an email on my phone from the bank. For the first time in 3 years, my automatic transfer to my parents' account had been rejected due to insufficient funds. Between losing the promotion and the rising cost of living, I was finally at my breaking point professionally, financially, and now emotionally. What did you just say? Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. The dining room suddenly felt smaller. My Aunt Linda and Uncle Ben exchanged glances across the table. My cousin Taylor looked down at her plate, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. I hadn't meant to blurt it out like that, especially not in front of extended family. Mom had invited them to celebrate Sarah's visit, another reminder of how differently our accomplishments were valued. But there was no taking it back now. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. If I'm such a disappointment, then maybe Sarah should be the one paying your mortgage and medical bills for the past 3 years. Dad's face paled. This wasn't how our family operated. We kept secrets. We maintained appearances. We never aired our dirty laundry. Dusty, please, Dad said softly. Let's not do this now. When should we do it, Dad? When I've drained my savings completely? When I can't afford my own rent anymore? When exactly is a good time to mention that I've spent over $50,000 supporting you both, while everyone praises Sarah for sending designer gifts? Sarah put down her wine glass with a sharp clink. That's not fair, Dusty. I didn't know. Didn't you? Dad's heart attack wasn't exactly a secret. Neither was their insurance situation. You never once asked how they were managing. Mom's face had transformed from shock to something harder. We never asked you for that money, she said, her voice cold. That was your choice. The injustice of that statement hit me like a physical blow. My choice. When Dad was in the hospital and you were crying about possibly losing the house, when you showed me the medical bills with that hopeless look on your face, what exactly was my choice, Mom? Sarah would have helped if we'd asked Mom, said, glancing at my sister for confirmation. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Of course I would have. But you didn't ask her, I pointed out. You asked me. The daughter who was here. The one who's apparently never going to be good enough. You're twisting my words, Mom said. I never said you weren't good enough. You literally just said I'll never be as good as Sarah. 10 minutes ago. In front of everyone. Mom waved her hand dismissively. You're being too sensitive. I was just pointing out that Sarah's career has more prestige. And that's what matters to you, isn't it? Prestige? Status? How things look to other people? My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Never mind that I've been keeping you both afloat financially. Never mind that I was here when Sarah was too busy to come home for Dad's surgery. Sarah stood up. That's not fair. I couldn't get away from work. You know how demanding my job is. And mine isn't. I took unpaid leave, Sarah. I set my career back to be here. Nobody asked you to do that, Mom interjected. Patty Aunt Linda's voice cut through for the first time. That's enough. We all turned to look at her. Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister, rarely contradicted her. What do you mean? Mom asked, her tone warning. I mean, I've watched you do this to Dusty for years, Aunt Linda said, always comparing her to Sarah, always finding her wanting, and it needs to stop. The room fell silent again. Mom looked betrayed. Dad looked guilty. And Sarah looked confused, as if she was seeing our family dynamic clearly for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about, Mom said to Linda. I do, actually, Aunt Linda replied. I was there when Dusty won that state art competition in high school, and you spent the whole celebration dinner talking about Sarah's college applications. I was there last Christmas when Dusty showed you the logo she designed for that national company, and you changed the subject to Sarah's bonus. I felt a surge of gratitude toward my aunt. For years I'd thought no one else had noticed that maybe I was being oversensitive, just as Mom always claimed. Is that true? Sarah asked, looking at our mother. Do you really do that? Of course not, Mom scoffed. Linda's exaggerating. She's not, I said quietly. It's always been like this. Dad cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe we should listen. You too, Mom's voice rose. You're taking her side. It's not about sides, Dad said. It's about hearing our daughter out. Mom's face flushed with anger. So I'm the villain now. After all we've done for you girls, after all the sacrifices we've made, sacrifices. I couldn't help but laugh. Like accepting $50,000 from me over the past 3 years. Those kinds of sacrifices. We never made you do that, Mom insisted. No, you just made it clear that it was my responsibility. The dutiful daughter who stayed close to home. Never mind what it cost me. And what exactly has it cost you, Mom challenged. Your mediocre job at that little design agency, the one you just got passed over for promotion at anyway. Her words hit their mark. I hadn't told anyone about losing the promotion. She must have heard it from somewhere else. How did you know about that? I asked, my voice barely audible. Andy's mother is in my book club, Mom said, almost smugly. She mentioned they hired someone with more experience for the creative director role, someone who could actually handle the position. The room went completely still. Even Mom seemed to realize she'd gone too far. Wow, I said, fighting back tears. Just wow. Mom, Sarah said, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. That was cruel. Mom turned to Sarah, her expression softening immediately. I'm just being honest. Dusty needs to face reality about her capabilities. My capabilities, I stood up so quickly my chair nearly toppled backward. You want to talk about capabilities? I've been supporting 3 people on my salary from that mediocre job. I've been paying your bills, designing on the side to make extra money, and still showing up for every family emergency. So don't you dare talk to me about my capabilities. I turned to Sarah. And you? You fly in here 3 times a year, bring expensive gifts, and fly back out congratulating yourself on being such a good daughter. When was the last time you asked them if they needed actual help? When was the last time you offered something more substantial than a Kate Spade handbag? Sarah's perfect composure finally cracked. You don't know anything about my life, she said, her voice trembling. You think everything's been handed to me on a silver platter, but you have no idea what I've been dealing with. What you've been dealing with? I repeated incredulously. Please enlighten us. What hardships have you faced in your corner office with your 6-figure salary? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I got laid off 3 months ago, she said. That corner office, it's gone. That 6-figure salary, also gone. I'm drowning in debt from trying to keep up appearances, and I'm about to lose my apartment. That revelation silenced everyone. Sarah's admission hung in the air like a thundercloud. Mom's face had drained of color. Dad looked stunned. Aunt Linda, Uncle Ben, and Taylor seemed frozen in their seats, witnesses to the unraveling of our family's carefully constructed facade. You lost your job, Mom finally managed. Why didn't you tell us? Sarah laughed bitterly. Why do you think, Mom? Look how you treat Dusty when she doesn't meet your expectations. Imagine how you'd react knowing your golden child is unemployed and broke. That's different, Mom began. How Sarah and I asked simultaneously. Mom opened and closed her mouth, seemingly at a loss for words. It's not different, Dad said quietly. We all turned to look at him. Dad rarely contradicted Mom. Patricia, it's not different, and we both know it, Jack, Mom warned. No, this has gone on long enough. Dad straightened in his chair. Dusty's right. We've been taking advantage of her generosity for years, and we've never properly acknowledged it. We never asked for her money, Mom insisted again. We didn't have to ask, Dad raised his voice, another rarity. We made it clear we expected it. I went along with it, because it was easier than arguing, and because I was ashamed that I couldn't provide for us anymore after my heart attack. But that doesn't make it right. He turned to me, his eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, Dusty. I've let you down. I've let this situation go on for too long. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to my eyes. For years I'd wished for this acknowledgement. And Sarah, Dad continued, I'm sorry. We created an environment where you felt you couldn't tell us you were struggling. That's on us. On both of us. He glanced at Mom, who was staring stonily at her plate. It's true, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. I've been pretending everything was fine because I couldn't bear to disappoint you. Especially you, Mom. My whole life has been about living up to your expectations. I just wanted the best for you, Mom said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Both of you. No, I shook my head. You wanted what looked best to other people. There's a difference. That's not fair, Mom started, but Dad cut her off. It is fair, Patricia. You've always been concerned with appearances, with what the neighbors think, what your friends think. You pushed Sarah into a career path she might not have chosen for herself, and you dismissed Dusty's talents because they didn't fit your vision of success. That's ridiculous, Mom protested. I never pushed Sarah into anything. You did, though, Sarah said softly. Marketing was never my passion. I went into it because you talked about how prestigious it would be, how much money I could make. But I've never really loved it. This was news to me. Sarah had always seemed so confident about her career choice. What would you have chosen instead? I asked her. Sarah gave a sad smile. Education. I wanted to teach high school English. A teacher mom couldn't keep the disappointment out of her voice, which only proved our point. Yes, Mom. A teacher. Someone who makes a difference in people's lives. Someone who doesn't measure their worth by the size of their office or the designer labels they can afford. Mom looked genuinely confused, as if she couldn't comprehend why anyone would choose such a path. So what happened with your job? Dad asked Sarah. Sarah sighed. The company downsized. My entire department was let go. I've been interviewing, but the market is tight, and I'm overqualified for some positions and underqualified for others. I've been living on savings and credit cards for months. Why didn't you tell us? I asked. I'm your sister. You could have talked to me. Because you already resent me, Sarah said simply. And you have every right to. I've been oblivious to what's been going on here. I've accepted the pedestal Mom put me on without questioning it. I've enjoyed being the favorite without considering what that meant for you. Her honesty was disarming. And honestly, Sarah continued, I was embarrassed. You've always had it together, Dusty. You know who you are and what you want. I've been playing a role my whole life, trying to be what everyone expected of me. When it all fell apart, I couldn't admit it. Not even to myself. I had no idea, I said, genuinely surprised. I always thought you had the perfect life. Sarah laughed without humor. That was the point. But it's all been smoke and mirrors. The designer clothes maxed out credit cards. The luxury apartment I can't make rent next month. The exotic vacations I post about on social media, carefully curated photos from press trips where I was working the whole time. So everything you've been telling us. Dad began. Lies, Sarah admitted. Or at least exaggerations. I've been living paycheck to paycheck despite my salary, trying to maintain an image that was killing me, and now without even the paycheck. Mom looked devastated. Her perfect daughter, the one she'd bragged about to all her friends, was just as human and fallible as the rest of us. And you, Sarah, looked at me. You've been supporting Mom and Dad this whole time, paying their mortgage. I nodded. And the medical bills. Dad's heart medication isn't fully covered by insurance. It's expensive. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. I should have known. I should have asked. I'm so sorry. We're supposed to be a family, Aunt Linda interjected. Families talk to each other. They support each other. They don't keep secrets and judge each other. You're right, Dad said. We haven't been acting like a family for a long time. So what do we do now? Sarah asked, looking around the table. I felt suddenly exhausted. Years of resentment, months of financial strain, and the fresh pain of losing my promotion had all come crashing down in one evening. I don't know, I admitted. But I can't keep doing what I've been doing. I just can't. Of course not, Dad said firmly. That ends now. But how will you manage, Mom? Asked practical concerns finally overriding her emotional reaction. We'll figure it out, Dad said. We can downsize. The house is too big for just us anyway. We've been talking about it for years. Downsizing, Mom looked horrified. What would people think? That's exactly the problem, Patricia, Dad said tiredly. Always worrying about what other people think instead of what's best for our family. We'll help you figure it out, Aunt Linda offered. Ben and I have been through tough times too. Uncle Ben nodded. We're here for all of you. The solidarity was unexpected and touching, but I still felt raw, exposed. I stood up. I need some air. Dusty, wait, Mom called, but I was already heading for the door. Let her go, I heard Dad say as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, wondering how we would ever move forward from here. 3 days passed, without a word from my family. I went through the motions at work trying to act normal, while my personal life was in shambles. The office felt different now that I knew the creative director position was officially beyond my reach. The new hire Marissa was starting next week. Andy, my boss, had suggested I help train her, apparently oblivious to how painful that would be. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess, the only coworker I was close to. "Lunch today? You look like you need to talk." I agreed, grateful for the distraction. We met at a small cafe near the office. "Spill it," Jess said after we ordered. "You've been walking around like a zombie for days." I gave her the condensed version, the family dinner blow-up, the years of financial support, Sarah's secret unemployment, and losing the promotion. "Jesus," Jess said when I finished. "That's a lot. Tell me about it. Have you talked to your family since?" I shook my head. Radio silence. Well, except for a few relatives taking sides. My phone had been buzzing with messages from extended family members, most of whom hadn't been at the dinner but had heard Mom's version of events. "Cousin Rachel. How could you embarrass your mother like that? Uncle Steve, family matters should stay private." The only supportive message had come from Aunt Linda. "Standing by you. Call if you need anything." And the promotion thing, Jess hesitated. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there are rumors of layoffs coming." My stomach dropped. "Seriously?" Jess nodded grimly. "The agency lost the Parker account. It's bad, Dusty, and you know how these things go." Last in, first out, I finished. I wasn't the newest employee, but I was far from the most senior. And without the promotion I'd been counting on, my position felt precarious. "Look." Jess leaned forward. "My friend at Cooper and West said they're looking for senior designers. You should apply." Cooper and West was a larger agency across town, known for their innovative campaigns and better pay. I'd always admired their work, but never seriously considered applying. "I don't know, Jess. It's not a great time for me to make a change." "It's exactly the right time," she insisted. "Before the axe falls here." I promised to think about it, but my mind was too full of family drama to seriously consider a job change. Back at the office, Andy called me into a meeting. His expression was serious as I sat down. "Dusty, I need to talk to you about your hours." I braced myself. "What about them?" "You've been logging out exactly at 5 every day. With the Parker account loss and Marissa coming on board, we need everyone to show more commitment." "More commitment," I repeated. "Andy, I've been here 7 years. I worked overtime for months on the pitch for the creative director position." "Which you didn't get," he reminded me unnecessarily. "Look, Dusty, I'm trying to protect you here. When the partners start looking at who to keep, they consider dedication." "Dedication shouldn't be measured by how many unpaid hours I put in," I argued. Andy's face hardened. "That's not how this industry works, and you know it. I need you on board with the new expectations. That means staying until the work is done, not watching the clock." I thought about my already stretched finances, the money I'd been sending my parents, the savings I'd depleted. I thought about the years I'd given this company only to be passed over for the promotion I deserved. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Andy's eyebrows rose. "This isn't a request, Dusty. It's how things are going to be moving forward." I left his office feeling cornered. At home that evening, I opened my laptop to check my bank account. The numbers were even worse than I'd feared. Without the promotion I'd been counting on, and with 3 years of supporting my parents, my financial cushion was non-existent. I was scrolling through my meager savings when a notification popped up on my phone. A Facebook update. I clicked it automatically, then froze. It was a photo posted by my cousin Taylor, a family gathering at my parents' house. Everyone was there: Mom, Dad, Sarah, Aunt Linda, Uncle Ben, and various cousins. Everyone except me. The caption read, "Family support in tough times means everything. Love you all." The exclusion stung more than I cared to admit. They were rallying around each other, healing together, and I wasn't included. I'd been the one holding things together financially for years, and now I was the outsider. My phone rang, startling me. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," her voice was tentative. "Hey," I responded, unsure what else to say. "I saw you weren't at the house today." "I wasn't invited," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "Mom said she texted you." "She didn't." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Dusty. I should have checked." "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. "How are things going there? tense, Sarah admitted. Dad and Mom are arguing about finances. They're talking about selling the house. That might be the best solution, I said carefully. Mom doesn't think so. She's been telling everyone you abandoned them, that you suddenly cut them off without warning. Anger flared in my chest. That's not what happened. I know, Sarah said quickly. Dad set the record straight. But Mom's, well, you know how she is. She can't admit she's wrong. So I'm the villain in her story. For some of the relatives, yes, Sarah said with painful honesty. But not for everyone. Aunt Linda has been amazing, actually. She's really standing up for you. That was something, at least. Look, Sarah continued. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how I've been complicit in all this. I want to make it right, but I'm not sure how. Just be honest, I said. With them, with yourself, with me. That would be a start. I'm trying, she promised. I have a job interview next week. It's not marketing, it's at a community college teaching business communication. It pays way less than I'm used to, but you might actually enjoy it. I finished for her. Exactly, she sounded relieved that I understood. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. The Cooper and West job listing Jess had mentioned was open in one tab, my dwindling bank account in another, and in a third, the Facebook photo of my family gathered without me. It was time to make some changes. I couldn't continue being everyone's support system while my own life was falling apart. I needed to put myself first for once. I opened my email and began composing a cover letter to Cooper and West. Then I looked up local therapists who specialized in family dynamics. Finding one who offered a free initial consultation, I scheduled an appointment for the following week. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I assume since we haven't heard from you that you're no longer helping with the mortgage. Your father and I will manage somehow. The guilt trip was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. Almost. I typed back, I never said I wouldn't help anymore. I said the current arrangement isn't sustainable. We need to talk about a different solution. Her response was immediate. There's nothing to discuss if you're abandoning your responsibilities. I turned off my phone without responding. For the first time, I saw her manipulation for what it was, and I refused to engage. The next morning, I checked social media to find more family photos posted, this time with captions clearly meant for me to see. My cousin Rachel family sticks together through thick and thin, no matter what. My uncle Steve sharing a quote about ingratitude being the worst sin. I closed the apps feeling a strange mix of hurt and liberation. The family dynamics I'd been trapped in for years were painful to break but necessary. I was starting to see that now. At work, I submitted my application to Cooper and West, then made it through another day of Andy's increasingly demanding expectations. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out my personal art supplies and began working on a painting I'd abandoned long ago. As the colors flowed onto the canvas, I felt something inside me begin to shift. The weight I'd been carrying for so long, the financial burden, the family expectations, the professional disappointment didn't disappear, but it became bearable. One brushstroke at a time, I reclaimed a piece of myself. What would you say is your biggest challenge in your relationship with your mother? Dr. Winters asked, her expression thoughtful but not judgmental. I'd been seeing her for 2 weeks now, and each session peeled back another layer of my family dynamics. Her inability to see me as I am, I answered after considering the question. She has this image of who I should be, and since I don't match it, I'm automatically less than. And how does that make you feel? The question was therapeutic cliché, but somehow it still hit home. Invisible, I said, surprising myself with the immediacy of my answer. Like the real me doesn't matter. Only the version of me that she wants matters. Dr. Winters nodded. That's a common feeling in relationships where conditional love is the norm. Your mother's approval seems to be based on specific achievements or behaviors rather than unconditional acceptance. Is there a way to change that, I asked? To make her see me. You can't change how your mother perceives you, Dr. Winters said gently. But you can change how you respond to it. The question is, what do you need in this relationship? What boundaries would make it healthier for you? Boundaries. The word had come up repeatedly in our sessions. The concept was still uncomfortable in my family. Boundaries were seen as rejection, as selfishness, but I was beginning to understand their necessity. After the therapy session, I went home to prepare for a job interview at Cooper and West the following day. Jess had put in a good word for me, and the creative director there had been impressed with my portfolio. It was the first glimmer of professional hope I'd had since losing out on the promotion. My phone rang as I was reviewing the company's recent campaigns. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello. Dusty, it's Tina Woods. I'm a financial advisor. Your Aunt Linda suggested I give you a call. I vaguely remembered Linda mentioning a friend who helped people with financial planning. Oh, right. Thanks for reaching out. Linda mentioned you might be in a situation where you're supporting family members financially. I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss sustainable approaches. I hesitated. Money discussions always made me uncomfortable, but if the past few weeks had taught me anything, it was that I needed to face these issues head-on. That would be helpful. When are you available? We set up a meeting for later that week. Meanwhile, I focused on preparing for my interview. The position at Cooper and West would mean a significant pay increase, more creative control, and a fresh start. I wanted it badly. The morning of the interview, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit and headed downtown to their sleek office building. The interview went better than I could have hoped. The creative director, Marcus, seemed genuinely impressed with my portfolio and my ideas for their upcoming campaigns. Your perspective is exactly what we're looking for, he told me. Fresh, innovative, but grounded in solid design principles. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. For the first time in weeks, the future seemed to hold possibilities rather than just problems. That afternoon, I met with Tina Woods at her office. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who got straight to the point. So Aunt Linda tells me you've been supporting your parents financially. I nodded, explaining the situation, the heart attack, the medical bills, the mortgage payments. Tina listened, taking notes. When I finished, she looked up with a serious expression. Dusty, I'm going to be direct with you. What you've been doing isn't sustainable, and it's compromising your own financial future. I know, I admitted, but they needed help. I understand that, but there are other options that don't involve you sacrificing your financial security. She showed me some calculations she'd made. At the rate you're going, you'll have no retirement savings, no emergency fund, and no ability to buy your own home or invest in your future. The numbers were stark and undeniable. I'd been so focused on helping my parents month to month that I hadn't considered the long-term impact on my own life. What options do they have? I asked. Several, Tina said. They could downsize to a smaller home and eliminate the mortgage completely. Your father might qualify for additional medical assistance programs. There are resources available for seniors that they're probably not utilizing. She handed me a folder. I've put together some information. They need to take responsibility for their own financial situation, Dusty, and you need to start putting yourself first. It was exactly what I needed to hear, but implementing it would be another matter entirely. I thanked Tina and headed back to the office, where I found Andy waiting by my desk. Where have you been? He demanded. We had a client meeting at 3. I froze. The meeting had completely slipped my mind with everything else going on. Andy, I'm so sorry. I had a personal appointment and I forgot to put it on my calendar. His expression was thunderous. This is exactly what I was talking about, Dusty. Commitment. Responsibility. The team needed you today and you weren't here. I could have apologized, profusely promised to do better, to work late to make up for it. That's what I would have done in the past. But something had shifted inside me. You're right, I said. I should have remembered the meeting. That's on me. But I've given this agency 7 years of my life, including countless unpaid overtime hours and weekends. I've been a dedicated team member. One missed meeting doesn't erase that. Andy looked taken aback by my response. It's not just about one meeting. It's about your attitude lately. Ever since Marissa got the creative director position... My attitude, I interrupted. You mean standing up for myself, setting boundaries around my time? That attitude? This isn't the place for this conversation, Andy said, glancing around at our curious colleagues. I agree, I said. But it's a conversation we need to have. I value my position here, Andy. I want to contribute and grow, but not at the expense of my well-being or by being undervalued. He stared at me for a long moment. Let's talk in my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I nodded, knowing that the conversation could determine my future at the agency. But strangely, I wasn't as afraid as I might have been. The Cooper and West interview had gone well. I had options. That evening, as I was making dinner, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it to find Sarah standing there looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, surprised. "Everything okay?" Sarah entered and sank onto my couch. "Not really. Mom and I had a huge fight. She wants me to take over the mortgage payments now that you've abandoned them." She made air quotes around the word. "Of course she does," I said, sitting across from her. "What did you tell her?" "That I can barely cover my own rent right now, let alone theirs. She didn't take it well." "I can imagine." Sarah looked around my apartment with new eyes. "This is nice, Dusty. I've never really looked at your place before. Your art is everywhere." It was true. My walls were covered with my own paintings and drawings, as well as pieces from artist friends. My apartment was modest, but filled with creativity and personal touches. "Thanks," I said. "It's not a luxury Manhattan apartment, but it's mine." Sarah winced. "About that. I had to give up my place. I'm staying in a friend's spare room until I figure things out." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's kind of a relief, honestly. Keeping up appearances was exhausting." We sat in silence for a moment. "I have a favor to ask," Sarah said finally. "And I completely understand if you say no." I braced myself. "What is it?" "I need a loan. Just enough to cover expenses until I secure a new job. I have an interview at the community college like I mentioned, but even if I get it, it won't start paying until the fall semester." I felt a familiar tug, the need to help, to fix, to support, but Tina's words were still fresh in my mind. "Sarah, I'm not in a position to help financially right now. I've drained my savings helping Mom and Dad, and my own job situation is precarious." She nodded quickly. "I understand. It was a long shot." But I continued, "You're welcome to stay here if your friend's place doesn't work out. The couch folds out into a bed. It's not much, but it's an option." Sarah looked genuinely touched. Thank you, Dusty. I might take you up on that." We ordered takeout and spent the evening talking. Really talking for the first time in years. About our childhood, about Mom's favoritism, about the paths our lives had taken. "I've always been jealous of you," Sarah admitted as we finished our food. I nearly choked on my drink. "What? Why would you possibly be jealous of me?" "Because you've always known who you are," she said simply. "You've always had your art, your vision. I've been trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be for so long that I don't even know what I want anymore." "That's not true," I argued. "You said you wanted to teach. That's knowing what you want." A realization I came to at 35 after pursuing a career I hated for over a decade, Sarah pointed out. "You've been true to yourself from the beginning, even when it cost you Mom's approval." I'd never thought of it that way before. I'd always seen myself as the failure, the disappointment. But maybe there was strength in the choices I'd made in staying true to my passions despite the lack of validation. "It's not too late to change direction," I told her. "The community college job could be a fresh start." Maybe she agreed. If I get it. And speaking of fresh starts, have you told Mom and Dad about the potential new job at Cooper and West? I shook my head. "Not yet. I'm not even sure if I'll get it. But if I do, it would mean a significant pay increase. Enough that I could help Mom and Dad a little, but not at the expense of my own financial security." "That's more than fair," Sarah said. "More than fair." As she was leaving, Sarah turned back to me. "I'm sorry, Dusty. For all of it. For being oblivious to what was happening with Mom and Dad. For enjoying being the favorite, without considering what that meant for you. For not being a better sister." The sincerity in her voice touched me deeply. "We can't change the past," I said. "But we can do better going forward." She nodded. "I'd like that." After she left, I sat looking at the painting I'd been working on, a piece about transformation and growth. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of possibility. Things were changing, boundaries were being established, and new paths were opening up. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it felt necessary and right. "We're excited to offer you the senior designer position at Cooper and West," Marcus said over the phone. Your portfolio and interview impressed everyone on the team. A surge of joy rushed through me. Thank you, Marcus. I'm thrilled to accept. We discussed start dates and details, and I hung up feeling a mixture of elation and relief. The position came with a 30% salary increase, better benefits, and most importantly, recognition of my talents and experience. I called Jess immediately to share the news. I knew it, she exclaimed. They'd be idiots not to hire you. When do you start? 2 weeks. I need to give notice here first. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when you tell Andy, Jess said. I laughed, but the thought of that conversation did make me nervous. Still, I'd been practicing setting boundaries and speaking my truth. This was just one more step in that direction. That afternoon, I knocked on Andy's office door. He looked up from his computer with a distracted expression. Dusty. What is it? I closed the door behind me and sat down across from him. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. His head snapped up attention fully on me now. What? Why? I've accepted a position at Cooper and West. Andy's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally calculation. Let's talk about this. What are they offering you? Maybe we can match it. It's not just about the money, Andy. It's about feeling valued and respected, about having room to grow. We value you here, he argued, but it sounded hollow even to him. Not enough to promote me after 7 years of dedicated work, I pointed out. Not enough to consider my well-being when demanding unpaid overtime. Andy sighed, leaning back in his chair. The industry is changing, Dusty. We all have to adapt. I am adapting, I said. By finding an environment where my contributions are recognized, my last day will be the 27th. As I stood to leave, Andy said, They're lucky to have you. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of my value that he'd ever offered. I nodded in acceptance and walked out feeling lighter than I had in months. That evening, my father came to visit alone, which was unusual. I made us both coffee, and we sat at my small kitchen table. Sarah told me about your new job, he began. Congratulations. Thanks, Dad. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. I also heard you're not in a position to keep helping with our expenses. I braced myself for guilt or disappointment, but his next words surprised me. And I want you to know, that's okay. More than okay. It's what should have happened a long time ago. I stared at him. Really? Dad nodded, looking embarrassed. I let things go on too long, Dusty. I was ashamed after my heart attack. Ashamed that I couldn't provide for your mother like I'd always done. When you stepped in, it was easier to accept it than to face that shame. His honesty was refreshing and unexpected. What will you do? I asked. We're selling the house, he said. I've already talked to a realtor. It's too big for us anyway, has been since you girls moved out. We can get a small condo mortgage-free and have some left over to create an emergency fund. How's Mom taking it? Dad smiled wryly. Not well initially. You know your mother. Status and appearances matter to her. But I think she's coming around. The heart attack was a wake-up call I ignored. This family crisis has been another one. I'm finally listening. I'm glad, Dad. He reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Dusty, for not seeing what was happening, for allowing your mother's favoritism to go unchecked, for taking your support for granted. You deserved better from us. Tears sprang to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And I want you to know that I've always been proud of you. Your creativity, your resilience, your kindness. I should have said it more often. We talked for another hour, really talked about the past and the future, about his hopes for a healthier family dynamic moving forward, about my new job and the boundaries I was establishing in all areas of my life. When he left, I felt a healing beginning, fragile but real. The next week was a whirlwind of wrapping up projects at work, preparing for my new position and continuing therapy with Dr. Winters. I was starting to understand the patterns that had defined our family for decades, and more importantly, how to break them. Sarah called midweek with good news of her own. I got the teaching job. It starts in September. That's fantastic, I said, genuinely happy for her. What about until then? I found a part-time position at a local bookstore. It doesn't pay much, but it'll keep me afloat. And if your offer of the couch is still open. Of course it is, I assured her. Just for a month or two, until I find my own place, she promised. Having Sarah as a roommate would be an adjustment, but it also felt like an opportunity to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. My last day at the agency was bittersweet. Jess and a few other colleagues took me out for lunch, promising to keep in touch. Andy gave me a stiff handshake and a generic reference letter, which was about what I'd expected. As I was packing up my desk, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Dusty," she said without preamble. "I need to speak with you about this house situation." I took a deep breath. "What about it, Mom?" "Your father is insisting on selling. He says we can't afford it without your help." "That's probably true," I said carefully. "It's ridiculous," she continued. "We've lived here for 30 years. What will people think if we move into some tiny condo at our age? They'll think you're making a sensible financial decision." "Easy for you to say with your fancy new job," Mom sniffed. "Sarah told me all about it." I bit back a retort. "Mom, why are you calling?" There was a pause. "If you agreed to continue helping with the mortgage even just for another year, we could stay in the house until your father's health improves. Then maybe he could go back to work part-time." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost sad. "Dad's doctor said he shouldn't work again, Mom. His heart can't handle the stress." "Doctors are overly cautious," she dismissed. "So, will you help or not?" "Not in that way," I said firmly. "But I've been talking with a financial advisor who specializes in helping seniors. She has some great resources that could help you and Dad navigate this transition." "We don't need charity advice," Mom said coldly. "It's not charity, Mom. It's expertise. Tina knows about programs and options that could really benefit you and Dad." "If you won't help, just say so," she said. "Don't try to pawn us off on some stranger." "I am helping," I insisted. "Just not by enabling an unsustainable situation." Mom's voice turned hard. "Fine. If that's how you want it to be, we'll sell. And when your father's health deteriorates from the stress of moving, that will be on your conscience. The old guilt trip might have worked months ago. Now I recognized it for what it was. Mom, I love you both. I want you to be secure and happy, but I can't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore." "Such dramatics," she scoffed. "You always were the sensitive one." After we hung up, I sat at my empty desk processing the conversation. In the past, I would have capitulated, agreed to whatever Mom wanted to avoid her disapproval. Now I felt sad for her inability to adapt but firm in my boundaries. The next day, as I was preparing for my first day at Cooper, and West Sarah arrived with her suitcases. "Home sweet home," she joked, looking around my apartment. "At least for a little while." "Make yourself comfortable," I told her. "The bathroom's all yours in the mornings. I have to be at work by 9, but you can take your time." "Thanks, Dusty, for everything." As we were setting up the sofa bed, Sarah's phone rang. She checked the screen and grimaced. "It's Mom. Again. She's been calling non-stop since they listed the house." "You don't have to answer." "I know," Sarah said. "That's new for me. Learning to set boundaries." "It gets easier," I assured her, though. I was still learning myself. Later that evening, as we were sharing a pizza, my phone lit up with a text from Aunt Linda. "Your mother is telling everyone you forced them to sell the house. I set the record straight. Standing with you." I showed the message to Sarah, who shook her head. "She's never going to change, is she?" "Probably not completely," I admitted. "But we can change how we respond to her." "To us changing," Sarah raised her pizza slice in a mock toast. "To us changing," I echoed, feeling a new kind of solidarity with my sister that I'd never experienced before. The first week at my new job was exhilarating and challenging in the best way. Marcus and the team valued my input, and I was already assigned to lead a major campaign for a national client. The environment was collaborative rather than competitive, and for the first time in years, I felt professionally fulfilled. At home, Sarah and I were establishing a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect and understanding rather than competition. We talked about our childhood, about the ways Mom had pitted us against each other, about our hopes for healing those old wounds. Everything was falling into place when I received an alarming call from Dad. "Your mother's threatening to contest the house sale," he said, sounding defeated. "She told the realtor we're having second thoughts." "Can she do that?" I asked. "Not legally, no. The papers are signed. But she's making the process difficult. creating drama with the buyers. The realtor called me today to ask if we're serious about selling. What did you tell him? That we are. But Dusty, your mother's making this harder than it needs to be. She's convinced if she creates enough problems, I'll give in and take the house off the market. And will you, I asked already, knowing the answer? Dad sighed heavily. No, we can't afford it, and it's time for a change. But I hate seeing her so upset. Have you talked to her about why she's so resistant, beyond the status issue? She says the house is filled with memories. That moving would erase our family history. I thought about it. Maybe there's a compromise. Could you take videos of each room before moving? Create a digital memory book. Save some meaningful items from the house to bring with you. That's actually a good idea, Dad said, sounding more hopeful. It doesn't solve everything, but it might help. And maybe I could help pack some of the more sentimental items I offered, to make sure they're handled carefully. Would you? That would mean a lot, to both of us. I promised I would, and we set a date for the following weekend. As I hung up, I realized this was a new kind of helping one that respected my boundaries while still offering support. It felt sustainable and healthy, in a way that writing monthly checks never had. That night, I worked on my painting late into the evening, adding layers of color and texture that represented the complex emotions of the past few months. The canvas was becoming something beautiful from the chaos, much like my life. 1 year later, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by my artwork, still amazed that this moment had arrived. My first solo exhibition, Boundaries, featured 20 paintings exploring themes of family identity and personal growth. The turnout was better than I'd dared to hope, with art critics from local publications mingling with friends and collectors. Dusty, these are extraordinary, Marcus said, examining a large canvas depicting a woman breaking free from tangled ropes. I knew you were talented, but this is another level. Thank you, I said, still not entirely comfortable with praise, but learning to accept it. It means a lot that you came. The whole team wanted to support you. You've become an invaluable part of Cooper and West this past year. It was true. My transition to the new agency had been transformative professionally. I'd been promoted to Associate Creative Director after just 9 months, and my campaigns had won 2 industry awards. There she is, a familiar voice called out. I turned to see my father making his way through the crowd, my mother beside him. Dad, Mom, you made it. I hugged them both, noticing how much healthier my father looked. The smaller condo and reduced stress had done wonders for his heart condition. We wouldn't miss it, Dad said proudly. Your first gallery showing. This is a big deal, Dusty. Mom looked around at the crowded space. Quite a turnout, she observed. People seemed very impressed. Coming from her, it was high praise. Our relationship had evolved over the past year, not perfect by any means, but healthier. The family therapy sessions Dr. Winters had suggested had helped us all learn to communicate more openly. Let me show you my favorite piece, I offered, leading them to a canvas near the back of the gallery. It depicted a family dinner table with transparent barriers between each person. In some places, the barriers were cracking, letting light through. It's us, Dad said softly. Isn't it? I nodded. It's called Breaking Through. Mom studied it for a long moment. It's very powerful, she finally said. You've always had a gift for expressing feelings through your art. The acknowledgement, simple as it was, meant everything. A year ago, she would have found a way to diminish my achievement or change the subject to Sarah's accomplishments. Speaking of Sarah, she arrived a few minutes later, slightly breathless. Sorry I'm late. Parent-teacher conferences ran long. Sarah had flourished in her teaching position, discovering a passion for education that had been buried beneath years of chasing corporate success. She'd moved into her own apartment 3 months after staying with me, but we still had dinner together every week, a new tradition we both cherished. You haven't missed anything, I assured her. The night's just getting started. These are amazing, Dusty, she said, looking around at the paintings. Truly amazing. Aunt Linda and Uncle Ben joined us, completing our family circle. Aunt Linda had been my rock throughout the past year, offering support and perspective when family dynamics threatened to revert to old patterns. I always knew you had this in you, Aunt Linda said, hugging me tightly. Even when you were little, drawing those incredible pictures that your mother stuck on the refrigerator. Mom had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I did keep them all, she said, in albums. I found them when we were packing to move. That was news to me. You did. Mom nodded. I have boxes of your artwork from elementary school through high school, I thought. Maybe you'd like to have them. The gesture, unexpected and meaningful, brought tears to my eyes. I would. Thank you. The gallery owner approached our group. Dusty, several pieces have sold already, including Breaking Through. The collector was quite moved by it. Pride bloomed in my chest. That's wonderful. As the evening progressed, I circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations and discussing my work. My co-workers from Cooper and West Jess from my old agency friends I'd reconnected with over the past year. They all came to support me. Near the end of the night, my family gathered again near the gallery entrance. We should celebrate, Dad suggested. Dinner next weekend. Our treat. That would be lovely, I agreed. You could bring that young man you've been seeing, Mom added. What was his name again? Nathan, I supplied. And yes, I'll invite him. The relationship was new, just 3 months old, but promising. Nathan was a sculptor I'd met at a local arts event, someone who understood my creative drive and supported my boundaries with my family. Good, Mom said. And Sarah, you'll come too, with that professor friend of yours. Sarah smiled. Alex would love to come. Thanks, Mom. The easy acceptance of our significant others was another sign of growth. In the past, Mom would have judged our choices, pushing us toward people she deemed suitable rather than those who made us happy. As we said our goodbyes, Dad pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, Dusty. Not just for tonight, though. This is incredible. I'm proud of how you stood up for yourself last year. It changed everything for you, for us, for our whole family. It wasn't easy, I admitted. The most important things rarely are, he said. But look what came of it. He gestured around the gallery at my family, laughing together at the paintings that had transformed my pain into beauty, at the new life I'd created by finally drawing clear boundaries. 1 year ago, I'd been supporting my parents financially, compromising my own security. I'd been stuck in a job that undervalued me, afraid to demand better treatment. I'd been caught in family dynamics that diminished me, accepting it as unchangeable. Now I stood in my own gallery, showing financially secure, professionally respected, and personally fulfilled. The family relationships that had once been sources of pain were healing, becoming sources of strength instead. As the gallery emptied and the evening wound down, I stood alone before the last unsold painting, a self-portrait showing a woman stepping into light, her face turned toward the Sunday. It was titled simply, Forward. The journey wasn't over. There would still be difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. My mother would probably always have her preferences and prejudices. But we had new tools now, new understanding. Most importantly, I had found my voice and the courage to use it. Sometimes the most profound act of love for others and for yourself is simply standing up and saying, enough. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships to flourish. It took me 32 years to learn that lesson, but having learned it, I would never forget it. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your true worth? What did that experience teach you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. It was there all along, waiting for you to claim it.